Hi, in this video I'm going to go over the creation of this door frame asset. The handle I made in a previous video, but this video will go right through modeling a low poly, subdividing a high poly, unwrapping the low poly. We'll bake our textures, and then we'll use Quixel and Photoshop to texture it and bring it into Unity. Okay, so to start with, just bringing in an image plane into my front viewport. This video is a bit sped up, so don't panic. Just explaining the workflow. So it's pretty straightforward. I'm just starting with a cube to build the side columns. I'm just using the viewport really as a guide. You don't need to be too specific about being exact. And I'm using the modeling toolkit there to insert edge loops and just extrude out the shapes that I want. Selecting those faces and extruding, then using the scale tool to actually bring out that extrusion to create new geometry. Extruding the top there. You'll see I'm not making every minute detail that's in the reference photo. I'm just trying to create a similar sort of shape using low poly geometry. So here I've made a cube that I'm going to use for the arch. And I'm inserting subdivisions because I want to create a bend. So using this bend deformer, just kind of eyeballing to try and get a fairly close approximation to the size and shape and position that is in the reference image. And it's about making a decision on the polygon count, on how many edges are reasonable to get a nice smooth shape while keeping it low poly. Obviously there I've just duplicated the column. Inserting a couple of edge loops in this arch so that I can just create an extrusion there. Once again, just copying that reference image, not too exactly, but just trying to create the same sort of impression that's in that image. For the back here, just making a cube. And I'll use the multi-cut tool to draw in something that sufficiently matches the curve there so that I can delete the faces on the inside to create that arch. Here I've just inserted a loop so that I can cut half of it and then duplicate, flip it over and join those two together and just merge the verts. Just merge those verts together and delete that leftover edge loop. Just positioning it around that archway to make sure I'm happy with how that looks and the position. I've just turned on ghosting there so I can see the transparency. Once again, just a cube, making these basic shapes. I mean, it's really just standard modeling skills of observing the shape of what you're trying to create and assessing what basic shapes make up that form, and then using your standard primitives as a starting point. You'll most often use a cube as your starting point for most modeling, but of course there's various techniques. And just based on the photo reference, I know that this shape, this sort of ornamental top section, has this forwards arch, this forward leaning face. So I've just rotated that, extruded out the sides. I'll just pull it forwards and make some various adjustments to it, just making those adjustments by eye. Not too concerned about precision really. There's no need to make it identical to a photo reference. The reference is just our guide. For these sort of curving things on the side here, once again a cube as our starting point and just inserting a handful of divisions and then manually moving those out to create a sort of organic flowing curve shape. The top section we can kind of get away with just a simple cube sitting on top of everything. Duplicate that side over. just extruding the top of this to get it a little closer to the reference material. Of course, I've deleted the earlier duplicate, and I can come back at any time to duplicate that over again, so that's not a problem. And I'm extruding these in to create the sort of indented bevel type shape. Simple extrusions. I've just deleted that top cube, I wasn't happy with it. Now I'm creating an extrusion in the top there. I'll just scale that out and then extrude upwards again to create this overhanging shape. And you can see I'm kind of experimenting a little bit when I extrude. Sometimes I'm pulling it up, sometimes bringing it back down and then scaling it out first, just to create an interesting shape for the top there. And so I've just deleted the duplicates because I don't need two of them to start with. I was originally thinking I would only unwrap one and then duplicate it over. I later changed my mind and kept everything original so that I could get variation in the textures. So once again, a cube is creating my door frame, the actual door panel itself. And just adjusting that pivot in case I want to later animate the doors being able to open. So I've made a cylinder here in the front view just to make sure that that matches that archway, and then deleted the bottom half, faces of the bottom half. And I ended up deleting everything. Again, I've changed my mind down the track. To start with, I was assuming I would only be looking at this from the one view. Of course, by deleting the back half, it means if the player ever looks behind it, they'll see straight through the model. They won't see the geometry on any faces that only have faces on one side. So I later duplicated this structure and then put that onto the other side. So I'm just inserting a couple of loops. Kind of experimenting to get the shape that I want. Using the multi-cut tool to slice through in the front view there is a nice easy way to try and get these two sort of quarter pie type shapes, quarter circle shapes. And I only need to do anything once, so anytime you can duplicate something over to make everything more symmetrical and, more importantly, easier and quicker, certainly do that. So extruding this inwards and pulling it back a little. Just seem to have something funky going on with those verts there, so we'll just merge those and clean it up a little bit. Always keep in mind you're trying to make clean geometry. It's very important. Look out for any n-gons laying around or any faces accidentally on top of each other. It's very bad practice to leave messy geometry, and it will just make your modeling way more difficult down the track if you've left messy geometry and forgotten about it or not even noticed it in the first place. You'll get to a point where it becomes increasingly difficult to model the shapes you're after because of messy geometry that you left behind earlier. So just keep an eye out on it. That's a critical skill in modeling is observing when you've made a problem with geometry and then cleaning it up as soon as you notice. So obviously I've just duplicated that over and merged those two together. So here we go, a little bit of messy geometry left over for some reason. So I'll just delete half, fix this half. So there I've just selected all the verts and then on the one plane and then scaled them down. And that just ensures that they're all aligned. And I've done the same here, I've deleted half. Just to make sure it's all identical, both sides of this archway are identical. Merge and delete that edge loop in the middle. Duplicate it all over. Merge my center verts. And so that ends up with a nice clean arch. Alright, so now I'll unwrap this. I'll start by generating, going to UVs and camera-based unwrap. Actually, before I start, I've got everything separated. I'm just going to combine those. And if I take a look in my UV editor, with the whole lot selected, UV camera based, and you can see how they relate to each other. That's a 3D image. So we'll just go into UV mode and scale this down, just move that off to the side. So this is our finished area in the 0, 1 space, and everything out here will be our work area. The way I'll unwrap this, typically the way I unwrap is go into my display polygons and turn on texture border edges. So this is my cut tool. If I hover over, that's the cut UVs, and this one is sew and merge UVs. Edge that I select when I cut that, it's drawing a thicker line, which is based on the edge width there. I can turn that up to make it quite thick. And I can sew them back together with the sew UV tool. So that's the cut UV edges, which I've put on the shelf, and the move and sew UV edges, which I've put on the shelf. Anything you want to put on the shelf, just hold down Control Shift and then click it, we'll add it to the shelf. Alright, so what I'm going to do is go through this model, and I'll start with these pillars. I'll double click this loop here and cut those. I'm going to model the two sides separately so we can do different textures on each one. And I'm just thinking about this logically, where we would want to cut these. So basically, I can't just do this whole pillar as one bit because of the different extrusions that'll all pull together when we try to cut them, when we try to unfold them. So with this cut and this cut through here and here, we've just separated this section. Likewise, by cutting here, this part through there, this middle pit will be flat, and we've separated these. Now the top, instead of cutting the top, I can simply select those two faces, and we'll just planar map those from the vertical, which is Y. And so I project those, and you can see that just as a planar map. I'm not worrying about unfolding at the moment, I'm simply worried about cutting everything up. So I think this will work okay. This top section might unfold a little bit strangely because of the shape. We'll see how we go. And what I want to do is select one edge loop along the vertical. Just try that again, Control Z and cut tool. So I'm picking the least obvious place to put a seam there, so no seams through these vertical sections. I might just take a look at this point. Normally I'd just go through the whole model and cut it all up before unfolding, but I'll take a look at what I've got. And I'll try and unfold the whole lot and just see what happens. So with those selected, I can turn in my unfold tool options. Just make sure unfold 3D is selected. If it's not, you just need to turn that on in your settings preferences plugin manager and find the unfold 3D plugin. I will click on pack for now and just hit apply. So that's trying to pack everything, but I'm mainly concerned obviously in these sections. So by selecting those faces, that shows me what I've got. I can see here these guys. Actually, what I'll do is turn on the checkers. And of course, nothing else has been unwrapped yet, so that's going to look messy. But we can see these pillars are fairly clean. There's not much stretching going on. We're obviously getting rotation through here, so these shells haven't been rotated evenly. And because of the shape of them, so I think that's going to be this shell. Just hit F to focus. Okay, so it's up here. It's the exact same sort of thing. I'll just turn on my rotate tool. I can rotate that like so, but we can see it's never going to perfectly align, so they're all square. Because of the shape, that's pulling. So basically these verts along this edge here is pulling the whole lot down. So what'll probably work better here is if I pick an edge. I just wanted to pick that inside edge loop, which is on this outside here. And I'll cut those. I'll just do the same here. Quick way to select that loop. If I just drag select, it'll select everything, and then hold down Control to drag select to unselect the bits I don't want, and G to repeat that cut. And I'll just do the same thing. I'll just select all of the UVs and unfold. This time I'll just click on the unfold tool in the menu there, and so that's done its thing. Just want to double check the settings. If I right click, that brings up the settings. Unfold 3D. Okay, try again. Apply. And let's take a look at these now. So I zoom in, we can see because they're separated, for example this one, what I'll do is rotate it so one of them is flat. So what I'm looking at here is that face. If we turn off the checkers, you can see I'm looking at this face on the inside, and this face is here. Because this one is the front, it makes more sense for that one to be flat. Oops. Just I want to rotate that whole lot. And so what I'm achieving there is getting this front lot aligned nicely. It might be a bit more obvious actually if I just scale that up temporarily. Just so you can see that's fairly flat. There's a little bit of distortion happening, and that's also the same, it's just because it's rotated. Ultimately, I think what will be best for these shapes is just to go ahead and cut each corner. I don't want that one cut, I'll just sew that back together. Just click sew. I just hit the repeat tool, so undo that and cut is what I'm looking for there. And we'll just make sure these are all cut. And I think I'll have the same problem. It's not as pronounced, so I'll just take a look. I'll do these top ones first. Select all of our UVs and unfold. Okay, so we can see these guys. they've all been unfolded into separate sections. So what I can do is just drag select those and temporarily scale them up just to demonstrate what's happened. What's happened is it's given us a very clean UV because it's basically just projected that from the side for each one that are scaled up there. So that works well. You need to sort of make those decisions on whether you're cutting the whole lot or doing keeping fewer seams and a little bit more stretching. And so I need to make the same decision about these ones down here, which is this shell. Now I don't like that the whole lot's rotating because it's giving me textures at an angle, so I know that one, but also this one. I'm just going to go into edge mode. I want to select these edges. So you can see you can select in the viewport or in your UV editor just as easily. Selecting those two and cutting. And I'll just unfold these ones only, so select just these UVs and unfold. And I'll just take a look in face mode, just so it's easier to see. Here they are. So because I've got two of them joined, so in this case the seam is there and there, we're getting a little bit of stretching on the side, so it's a bit more obvious there. It's fairly minimal. I don't think that's going to be a big problem. But you know what, let's just go ahead and I'll just grab those and control select, unselect the ones I don't want, and I'll cut those. Same with these. Here I'll just G to cut those, cut those. So more often than not, when you have these sort of extrusion tapering type forms, you won't get a nice clean unfold without having to chop it up a little. I'll have the same problem with here. What'll work well, I think, is cutting these guys. Just in the top and the bottom, just those corners. Because now, I'll just cut. I'll just do this side and just to demonstrate. So we're looking at this piece. I'll just move it over here where it's visible and unfold just that piece. And you can see because I've cut the corners, that's allowed these edges to come separate, as opposed to the other side, which was this one. Because the corners aren't cut, it's forcing these faces up here to stretch and join. So the end result, let's just scale those up and take a look. Compare the two. The end result is this one with the top and bottom edges cut. It's nice and clean and quite a good unwrap. We're not getting a seam through there, and we're only having seams where it's not going to be very noticeable. Whereas this one, it's not too bad, but you can see that stretching at the top and the bottom through there, caused by no splits through here. So we do want to split these edges. I'll just turn off that checker. I mean, this sort of decision making when you're doing your unwrap, it just comes from experience, having done a lot of unwrapping. You learn what's going to work and what's not instinctively, but when you're new to it, it's just a matter of trial and error. Just keep trying things until it kind of works. So I'll just go through now, the whole model and chop it up where I think it will work. Easy way to chop that top one is just planar map. So the last setting was Y, so that's planar mapping from the Y axis. I can do the same here. For example, I can planar map, but it's not going to be from Y. It's going to be this direction, which we can see is Z. So it projects that, and you can see that projects in that way. I'll do the same, just hit G to project there in the Z. I'll do the same for the doors, one by one. G. So that's a nice quick way, is just to use your planar mapping tool. These ones I'll hit G, but I'll also, just to repeat that planar mapping, but I'll also chop those edges. Same problem that I just explained with those bevels down here. We'll chop that. Chop those ones. It's going to be a similar kind of problem through here. We'll chop that and that. And I'm tempted, this one will be interesting. I'm tempted just to leave these all together and see how that goes. If it doesn't work, I'll just come back and put some cuts in there. I think that's almost everything. This guy through there and there. Actually, I'll just do these two. So this seam doesn't need to be cut because this face here can unfold in the same plane as that without too much problem. Oops, accidentally cut that. I'll just sew that back. Do the same over here. Just noticed I missed those two. Cut. Cut those. Yep. With display error here, where for some reason it's not showing my cut. I think I did those. Bit annoying. Maya being a little bit difficult for some reason. Just move forwards and see if that works. This one's going to be a problem, so I'll just separate that. Same with there. Same with under there. Really don't need those cut though, so let's just select them and sew. Because that's just from the vertical, the y-axis, this whole bottom section. We're going to need to cut those. Yep. I think these guys were the ones that were giving me... Okay, display error's gone. It's letting me cut it now. That was weird. We've got this little extrusion on the door, so I'll just cut those. We'll do the top of this separate. I've got faces in there, but I actually want to keep those because this door potentially could be animated to open, so we might see those inside faces. Alright, let's just see how we go. So I think I've cut everything. I'm now just going to grab the whole lot in UV mode and do my unfold. So once again, that's under polygons, unfold options. Make sure that's to unfold 3D and hit apply. I'll turn on my grid and take a look at my checkers. take a look at what we've got, and I'll turn off that wireframe over the mesh. And that's looking pretty good. This bit's not worked. We've have obvious distortion here. So this section, really I just want to unfold that. Sorry, not unfold, I want to project that. From the Z. Planar, Z, project. And we can see with that checker turned on how that works. So that does give me a little bit of distortion through there, but it's so minor, I don't think I'll worry about it. And I'm just adjusting that to make sure it looks fairly square. And the scale there, we want that to match roughly the size of the other checkers, which is about right now. We don't need to be too accurate when we adjust those scales. And so that's largely all unfolded correctly, but it's automatically packed using Maya's packing, which is terrible. It's a really bad pack. There's a lot of empty space. We could manually put that puzzle together in a much more efficient way. So what I'm going to do right off the bat is grab the whole lot and scale that up. Now I'm just sort of estimating roughly the size I think I'll be able to get away with in order to manually pack all of that into that 0, 1 space. So we'll move it over here because that's not finished. So now what we have to do, and this bit's a little bit tedious, but it's not overly time consuming. It's a matter of going through and one by one packing this section, filling up all this space as tight as possible. We can use these rotate tools, and usually what will happen is you'll get the whole lot packed and you'll find it's either not quite enough space or the opposite, there's enough empty space that you could do it better. And then at that point you need to either scale the whole lot up or the whole lot down and then repack it again. So yes, that's a little bit tedious, but it's worth doing. It's not actually that time consuming, it's usually only a few minutes, but you'll turn around and end up with a much more high quality texture. Because we have a finite amount of texture space inside here. So, we might be using, say, a 1024 squared texture, and that's how many pixels we have applied to our texture. If we end up with, say, a total of 25%, so a quarter of that texture not used, we may as well have just used a 512 texture or whatever. You need to get the best quality possible, you need to really be efficient and use as much of that texture resolution as you can. Now, when you're packing, you really want to be trying to keep things in a logical way. So this shell, I'll just turn off that checkers, I don't need that. This shell's this vertical bit, and this shell here, as we can see, is the vertical bit. So I've got the left on the left, and I've got the right on the right. As much as possible you want to keep it like that, so things at the top of your texture, at the bottom there. So this face, for example, which is this piece, actually a better example might be a door section. So a door here, the bottom of the texture should be the bottom of your geometry should be the bottom of your UVs. You don't want to flip things upside down and have it nonsensical, because we're going to take this all into Photoshop later and manually create our textures. It's a lot easier to do if you can understand what you're looking at. That's the general rule of thumb, the general principle that you're trying to follow. That does fall apart as you work towards getting a tighter UV pack, because what happens is you start needing to move pieces around in your little jigsaw puzzle to get it all to fit, and it's inevitable that you have to make compromises, but just generally you're trying to keep these logical. This piece looks a little bit distorted. I just want to check your UV, so just keep an eye on it as you're working. So we're looking at this piece. Okay, it's not too bad. It's just this little section up here. It's fairly minor. And being right up there, I don't think the player would come up. The player's head height is around here somewhere. It shouldn't be too noticeable when it's textured. If we wanted to, we could easily put a cut through here, which could be worth doing. Actually, it really is worth doing. I've got a cut through there. I might as well just continue that. So if you need to make adjustments, it's really not a problem. You just put the cut in where we want them. Not only is it not a problem, it's absolutely worth doing because it makes gives you a better texture. So I just need to find those pieces so that I'm not unfolding the whole lot. I actually only want to unfold face mode. These guys up here. I'll just turn off that checker. Kind of annoying. Yeah, it's just this one and this one. So in here, I can see what they are. I'm just going to hold down Control, right click, 2 UVs, and then 2 UV. So I've got those UVs selected. So now when I unfold, it only unfolds. Oops. Should only unfold those two. Something went wrong. Let's just try that again. I'll select those. Okay, what went wrong? I right click on my UV options. Because I got pack turned on, I want that turned off. And just hit apply. And so that's only unfolding those. It's not trying to unfold everything else. So just be careful of that one. Yep, so that's good. I just need to manually align those a bit. Great. Actually, I'll just double check how that's come out. Take a look at our checkers. Much better. No distortion. So it was minor. I wasn't too concerned about it, but it does look better like that. So back to packing. Okay, I'll just speed this section right up. This is really straightforward. There's not much to explain here, so there's no point trying to follow along step by step. You want to make your own analysis of your UVs and don't just place everything exactly where I placed them. But notice here, I'm making sure that I align everything . So I've just noticed some problems with the geometry. I'm just looking out for checking that I don't have any messy geometry left on the model. And in this case, I've just re-projected this section, which was just a bit messy the way Maya unfolded it automatically. So reprojecting it has given me nice, clean shells. Likewise with these ones, sometimes it is much easier just to select the faces, especially if they're all in the one plane, and just project UVs. So I'm just putting them on top of each other there to make sure they're about the same size. Checking that everything's blue when we turn on shaded UV display. That shows us any flipped or reversed UV shells. So you just want to turn that around, just flip it using the flip UV button. Everything should be blue when that shaded UV button is turned on. So having a little difficulty with this shell, so just checking which one it is. And I've decided that I really need to cut those instead of keeping them in the original rectangle shape, which was distorting them. And you can see they've unfolded quite cleanly once they're cut. So often when you're going through the packing process, you will need to make adjustments, sometimes to your actual geometry and sometimes just to the UVs themselves. You often need to make minor reprojections of sections. It's really not a problem. It's all designed to be non-destructive. You can come back and make changes to your unwraps at any time. So don't feel like you have to start up over again if you make a mistake. That's certainly not what you should be doing. I'm just trying to keep everything in either the vertical or horizontal as much as possible. Being a game asset, we get a lot of pixelation if we have things at too much of an angle. Basically because we're working with relatively low texture resolutions, so those diagonals can be noticeably pixelated. So here we've got another shell that's a bit wonky, so just reproject that. They're just using the unfold UV tool to let me paint over those UVs, and sometimes it will work quite well. Depends on the nature of your shells, on how well that tool works. But in this case, it worked for me. These sections look pretty wonky, so I'll just reproject those. Just select my faces and planar map from that one direction. You can see that's worked really quite well from that Z axis, or X. Just checking my shells aren't mirrored, aren't flipped. And now it's just a matter of putting this jigsaw puzzle together, just going through and snapping everything into position, trying to fill up this space as much as possible. It's really important with your unwraps not to leave too much empty space. Here I'm just making sure everything is logical. So left to right, these shells represent the 3D model. You can see they turn around. They're all next to each other correctly. You typically want to do that with everything, is keep the left on the left, the right on the right, some things that are vertical, the top at the top, the bottom at the bottom, etc. It's pretty important, really, mainly because it helps you understand what you're looking at, your UV snapshot. Same with these pieces, I'm just aligning them so they make sense in relation to the 3D object. And in here I'm just shuffling things around to try and fill up this space as best as possible. You can see I've managed to get the scale fairly close. I've managed to fill them so that it will fill the 0-1 space without a great deal of extra unused resolution. You don't want much empty space. Having said that, you still want to keep a few pixels of padding in between each shell. So it's about finding the balance. Ultimately, packing the UVs is a fairly quick process. It really only takes a few minutes. Even if you're sitting there for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it takes you, it's worth doing again if it means being able to get a tighter UV pack. And so that's the UVs unfolded.